Well, welcome to this discussion taking place as part of the Newcastle University 2020 and 2021 Creative Careers event. My name is Lander and I'm a final year student studying media communication and culture. And today with me I've got ldaniels from 17Ninteen, who is a participation and engagement officer.
And my name's Lily. I work at 17Ninteen, which is it's based in Holy Trinity Church in Sunderland's East End, and we are a participatory heritage project looking at stories from 1719 to today.
So I believe that those students that are watching this that will be really interested in knowing maybe how you got into your position. So would you give us a little bit like an overview about that and what was your journey to get into this position?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose it starts with doing my undergrad. So I did a BA Hons in glass and ceramics based in Sunderland. I have always really loved making things, and it was quite a gamble for me to say I want to do a degree in making something. And I think as someone who grew up in a council estate, sometimes when you're taking a gamble on a career path, it can be beneficial to see what jobs there are out there that have a paycheck rather than being freelance, and that has always been really attractive to me. So I started to think about maybe being a teacher, maybe working in curation, those kind of jobs that are parallel to working in art, but maybe not necessarily like making art. And I was lucky enough to be a volunteer at the National Glass Centre. I helped develop some workshops with ceramics. I got a taste for how cool it is to work with such a wide variety of people. Like I got to work with participants who were adults, participants who were children. I got to work with people who had SEND, so had access requirements. And it was every day was different. And I thought, oh, this is what I really like. What I really like is spinning a lot of plates, working with a lot of people and getting them excited about art. I still have a creative practice. I still make things, but it's usually for me or for small projects where I don't have to worry about like how I'm going to pay rent. I can just follow my creativity in whatever direction I like and not have to think about how to market it and things like that. So I worked as like a facilitator for a couple of years, facilitating workshops using my degree. I worked with Fab Lab in Sunderland, who are a 3D printing lab. They also do like laser cutting. They're really cool. So I got to learn about that. I worked with the Glass Centre. I worked as a support worker. I was also a barista for a little bit. Like so was I. doing the traditional millennial hustle jobs. And then, yeah, I got a steadier job working with the National Glass Centre, like planning things, and that was so brilliant. But what I realized was that I hadn't really done any training. Like I'd gone from doing my degree and really loving my making practice to then doing like project planning, and I hadn't really. There was no training with that. I just learned everything on the job, and really what I wanted was to know that what I was doing was right. Mm-hmm. So I found an MA in Brighton in inclusive arts practice. Mm-hmm. So I moved all the way down to Brighton, worked at a little heritage railway while I was doing my MA, developed like an artistic practice in how to include people who maybe are underrepresented in the arts. And then I worked in Milton Keynes for a little bit, really sort of getting those skills down. Then this opportunity to come back to Sunderland came just as the lockdown started. So this job is like my dream job. It involves so many things that I love, including like I'm really passionate about history. I think that people need to see themselves reflected in history and need to know that their journey as part of everyone's journey. But I haven't necessarily had a chance to do that. A lot of my artistic practice is about like religious themes, so working in a church was really cool. And yeah, I've been inside the church once in a year.
Once.
Yeah. Oh. But I mean, just like everyone who's working in participation at the moment, I saw an article this morning that said that we have to ban the word pivot, that we're not allowed to say pivot anymore because people say it too much. Everyone has had to pivot slightly to digital. I'm going to say it loads. we've had to pivot to digital and do much more digitally engaged stuff, which obviously, like, that was my potted CV. I haven't done anything digital. I'm a potter at heart. I kick a wheel and make it go and like light fires. I'm not a digital person, so it's been like a really steep learning curve for me. But that's the highlight, really.
Yeah, that's the part of like the professional journey, isn't it? Like every day you learn something new. So, and stepping out of your comfort zone and challenging yourself is basically gonna allow you to like seek that self-growth anyways.
I think one of the things about this scenario where there was no good practice, no one knew how to do this. There were people who were like slightly ahead of the curve, but for the most part we were all like building the car as we drove down the road, like making it up as we go along. And I think that actually that like some of the richest learning comes from making mistakes, like throwing things out there and seeing if they get are well received and just doing it at a run.
Following on that, what you were saying about the making bigger mistakes or not, I have a question that I would like to ask you in terms of that. And that is, now reflecting on your professional journey, what would you think that it has been your biggest no-no and your biggest asset?
Biggest no-no? For me personally, my biggest like learning curve has been that actually I can do this. I think you can kind of tell from all of that like jumping around that I was kind of going like, oh, maybe I can't do this. Maybe this is too hard. Maybe I need to go and get training and figure things out. I think that self-doubt is a big deal, but the only way that you can really get through it is to do it and then go, oh, I can do it. And the only really way to combat self-doubt is to go, maybe I can't do this, but I'll have a go. So I think, yeah, the biggest no-no of like, don't doubt yourself is also like the biggest success, like doubt yourself and do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. That is how you will actually know if you're gonna do it or not. So
yeah. How else are you gonna find out if it's possible?
Exactly. As they say, you've got to try things once anyways to see what happens. Exactly. So,
in terms of like professionalism, it's a really interesting sector because there's lots of different kinds of professionalism. So you have people who are very slick, very corporate in how they approach things, and you have people who are really earthy and autoethnographic, like they're very open about making mistakes and what's part of their practice. Like I work a lot with small press people doing publishing and things, and they tend to be like really open about what they're going through, why they haven't answered your email for 6 months. And it's actually really refreshing because I work with funders. I have to go from being like informal Lily, nice and chatty, to being like, and we've delivered 20% of our KPIs. So I think in terms of like no-nos for professionalism in this industry, they kind of are none. You just have to find who's the same kind of professional as you and work together.
Exactly. And going back into what you were saying about your master's in Brighton, just bring in a little bit from that as well. And obviously you were talking about the marginalized group in heritage, and kind of like everyone has been talking about the Black and ethnic minority communities that have been kind of like long marginalized or like underrepresented in like heritage. What is kind of like your thoughts around this?
I think it's massively important and a well overdue conversation that we should have been having for the last decade easily. I think what's brilliant to see is that, especially within the Northeast, there's a real attitude change to one of the traditional models of doing participatory projects is you say, we're going to make this, you find that audience group and you make that. And they are your participants. They do what you tell them to do. They work with who you tell them to work with. and it's like this little, it has no impact beyond beyond making that thing. And I think within the Northeast recently, there's been a real shift to saying, what do you want to do? Who's out there who wants to work with us? Who do you want to work with? What do you want to make? What do you want to talk about? So giving a lot more control to these audience who we've labeled as hard to reach, and recognizing that they're not hard to reach. We just weren't reaching them with anything they wanted because we weren't asking that question. I think that inclusion is often like an oversaturated word. It's used a lot in sort of like HR terms in a kind of empty way. And I think that inclusion actually means sharing your power. If you think about the cultural venues within the Northeast and within England, they are some of the best in the world, and they are controlled by such a small pot of people. Whereas if to include more people in those decision-making processes would mean that the people who accessed it, the people who cared about it, would be much more diverse. And that's definitely what we're doing at 17Ninteen. And I do see that in the Northeast. For example, there's culture against racism that's happening in Newcastle at the moment, who are doing fantastic work, like planning out how to break down barriers, what's going to happen, and they're doing that by including people in the conversation. And I think that, yeah, including is the key part to inclusion.
Yeah, I think that with that as well, kind of as you were saying, like apart from including people, it's about like sharing and making sure that other people are heard as well. It's not just about including them, it's also like making sure that the voice is actually heard. That is what counts in that as well. So looking into this and what you were saying, kind of like in the Northeast, how do you think that COVID has kind of like impacted this? Like, has it given it kind of like going backwards, or do you think that it's still going forward, or what is your perception around that?
I think something really interesting about COVID is venues have this ability to rely on their perception. So you can walk into a building and there's this idea that by doing that, you can get a sense of their values. So like if you walk past a ramp, you know that it's wheelchair accessible. If you meet someone from reception and they're a person of color, you know that the staff are inclusive. If you see Braille around the building, then you know that they're catering to certain audiences. Without that access, you shut down all of those very small gestures and ways for people to see who's being included. So you have to actually say it out loud. And I think that's been really interesting to watch. People go from, of course we're inclusive, of course equality and diversity is important, to this is how, and I'm saying it out loud and I'm laying it out on the line. And I don't know why that wasn't happening before. I don't know why we weren't having conversations in like real language that people could understand, but it's really good to see. And I think because the conversation around Black Lives Matter and monuments and contentious history has been happening, we've had an opportunity to use this new skill of saying our values out loud and putting them into action in a much more direct way, rather than just putting a ramp in or a hashtag on your social media. It has to be active, it has to be visible and understandable. So I think that's, in terms of like how digital engagement has changed due to COVID, that's definitely true. But I think, I don't know, it would have been really interesting to see how the events of the summer would have impacted venues if we were open and COVID and lockdown wasn't happening, how they would have responded to these events. Well, I guess we'll find out eventually. Eventually they'll reopen and we'll find out. But it does feel like the conversation has opened up to more people, especially because there's, for all of those lovely things about walking into a venue and finding out what they think about something, you also get the intimidation of it. So like lots of venues have those big columns that you have to confront and sort of British imperial architecture that you have to feel comfortable in. There's also sort of a code of conduct that you're not told. So if you've never been to a museum or gallery before, you don't know where to go. And I think that something that's really, again, something really interesting about COVID is we saw it when things reopened over the summer, was that people put out sort of welcome guides, like this is what we're doing to reopen, this is how it'll work. And they were very similar to access adaptations that we put in place for people with autistic spectrum disorder. You put out a social story saying, this is where you can buy your tickets, this is where you'll queue, this is what will happen, so that the sensory overwhelm is reduced. And if we were just doing that for everyone, just so that they knew how to access these things after COVID, it's like, why weren't we doing that before? Why didn't we have these, again, these unwritten rules? Why didn't we write them down? So I think that'll be really interesting. Who will those code of conducts and those, like, this is how you access us, who will that open up the doors to? That's really exciting.
Yeah, and how that will be kind of like seen in a post-COVID world as well. Right, now we're going back into your role as participation and engagement officer. So if you could tell me a little bit about your current role, like what does it actually like entail, or what does a day in the life of working as a participation and engagement officer look like for you?
Okay, so without lockdown, if we went in lockdown, I'd go to the church, I'd open up, and we would be running lots of different activities that were agreed with funders. So I'd be setting up for school workshops, I'd be setting up for tours and family events, I'd be setting up for, we have a bring your own lunch option where you can just bring your lunch to the church, hang out, have a coffee, have a chat. We have recollection activities happening. I have to sort of sort out AV things for the exhibitions to work, and there would be lots of emails, lots of meetings. I'd probably be working some weekends and evenings, running events, working with freelancers to develop exhibitions and content, working with community groups to do exactly the same thing, working with lots of different partners from Sunderland Council to we have an outreach project that sees events happening in unusual spaces like pubs and marketplaces. So it would be a lot of, it's a mix of admin and facilitation, working with a lot of different partners and shareholders. The reality now is that I get out of bed and I turn on the computer, and there's lots of emails and lots of Zooms, and I'm working with community groups to make craft boxes that'll go out to community groups that are inspired by our collection. I'm working with volunteers on a volunteer-led exhibition. There are some vacancies if anyone wants to apply to be a volunteer curator. You can email me directly at ldaniels at the cct.org.uk. We do a weekly Facebook Live with volunteers and different partners on a specific theme. So
I have been a little bit stalking you on LinkedIn.
Good.
I love how you start all of them saying like, what do you have for lunch today? It's a good way of like breaking the ice. So
the goal was to replace that bring your lunch element. So the goal was to replace that with something. So it was to keep you company while you have your lunch. And I never have a good lunch. So it's always like, what are you having for lunch, guys? I'm eating crackers and Diet Coke. That's it. That's how it's described.
What did you have today then?
Crackers and Diet Coke. But the week that this is going out, but we've got a digital picnic, which is our Facebook Live on the Thursday about inclusion. So we're inviting guests to come and talk about what inclusion means to different venues in the Northeast. So if you were interested about what I just said, just stalk me on LinkedIn, apparently.
They took me to the business. I done my research.
You got to find out. So yeah, it's a different job at the moment. It's a very different job. It's a lot of planning, a lot of trying things and no one enjoying them. Like we developed a Christmas concert that was really well received. And like the same week, we also developed a recollection activity that no one came to. Like,
Yeah.
we're just trying things out as we go at the moment. But I get to have conversations like this, which are great. I get to work with lots of really talented people and think creatively about heritage and get as many people involved as possible. So that's I mean, it's a good day. It's a long day, but worth it, I think.
And also with that, as you were saying about with engagement. So basically, overall, you have seen how engagement rates have been kind of like lowering down, or like, but do you see kind of like hope for like it to be like brought back as well? Like how are you seeing that?
That's a really good question. What's really interesting is that, I mean, we always had participation at the heart of the project, but a lot of venues, participation or learning and engagement, or however they brand it, is seen as sort of something else that they do. Like, it's nice, it's a way of showing the community that they're welcome. It ticks a lot of boxes, but it's maybe not the main thing that they do.
Yeah.
But with no venue, suddenly participation becomes the only thing you can do. You can only do live events on Zoom or Facebook, or you can only do craft packs and worksheets and digital workshops with schools. These are your options. I mean, there are digital exhibitions and they're really good standards, but it's not a replacement for going to the venue. And in a lot of ways, it has engagement built in because it tends to have embedded interpretation in these digital exhibitions so that you can engage in a different way. It's about engagement. So I think what's really interesting is if you are interested in this sector of the sector, that suddenly we're the most important bit. Like,
yeah,
like, and solutions are turning up day on day to make these new ways of engaging digitally, and they're not going to go away in a post-COVID landscape. We're not suddenly going to stop doing video calls. We're not going to abandon those audiences that have came along throughout this pretty awful time and just been like, oh well, see you in the gallery. Like, we can't do that. Those doors have to remain open. So
it's gonna be more kind of like a blended approach, as you would call it. Like a new normal is gonna be like a blended approach.
Yeah, definitely. And if you are a young person who understands Snapchat, I don't, you have more solutions in your back pocket than I do. You probably know things or have ideas that I don't, because the tech that I use is the tech that I've been using for 10 years. Like, if you're interested in this, you have answers that I don't have, and we're gonna need you. Like, well, I mean, we need you already. Graduate soon, please. But it's a weird landscape.
Yeah. With that as well, you were kind of like saying about Snapchat and all that. It's kind of like broadening up more to like the importance of social media and kind of like this COVID-19 world right now. Basically, like, how do you think that like social media has helped 17Ninteen on this as well? Because I have been kind of like researching your Twitter and like things like that, and I do see that you do put like a lot of information out there. I don't know if it is you, the person that is behind the social media, or not, but I just wanted to like double check.
It's a team effort. We don't have a dedicated social media person, so it's myself and the center manager and the project manager and the craft skills manager and some volunteers as well, all creating all this content. But without social media, I don't think anyone would know we're here. And also that we wouldn't have as many participants in the things that we run. I don't really know that there's a way to overstate how important it has been. I mean, we could have gone absolutely wild and set up a TikTok and I don't know, what are the young people on now? But we've managed to reach a lot of families on Facebook. We reach a lot of academics and sort of more heritage fans on Twitter. We get to share the work of our apprentices and what's happening in the building as it's being rebuilt on Instagram. So they all serve a really like core function for us. And I mean, something that we're looking at more and more is Google and Google Arts and Culture, doing Google tours, things like that. So yeah, using existing technology and potentially existing technology that you know about and I don't.
So going back with another question I've got here is looking into the top tips that maybe you will give Newcastle University students now if they want to pursue career like participation and engagement, what would your top tips and tricks will be for people that want to pursue this career?
So I always repeat advice that I was given at university, which is just say yes. I think that within the creative and especially and within heritage industries, you do have to be willing to say yes to an opportunity and then figure out how you're going to do it. You might not feel like you have the skills and you're set yet, or you might feel like it's maybe not exactly the direction you want to go in. If you're not sure, say yes and figure it out as you go. I honestly think that is, especially now, especially when we're in this weird situation, say yes and figure it out. I think in terms of like, I know that everyone always wants like, how do I get a foot in the door? Everyone volunteers. It's the nature of the beast. There are a few really good opportunities for apprenticeships and interns. For example, I know that there's a really interesting digital internship in World War II studies, and that's on like Northeast Jobs currently. So there are paid opportunities if you aren't able to volunteer, even part-time, but you need to be able for people to know your name. And a lot of this is about figuring out like what kind of participation you're interested in. Do you want to be a facilitator and teach? Do you want to work as an artist and work with people on bespoke briefs? Do you want to work in academia in some sense? Like all industries, there are pockets within pockets. So volunteering gives you the chance to get in there, see if that's for you, and then reflect on it. Likewise, being a volunteer is astounding. You are allowed to criticize the venue, the organization that you volunteer with, in a way that you can't as a staff member. So if you're like, do I want to work with these guys? You can go in, pull apart what they're doing if you like, pull it, like really get to grips with like, why are we doing it like this? Why are we doing it like that? What's the purpose of this? Really get to understand how they figure things out. And if you at the end of it think, oh, I don't want to work there, at least you're not working there and now have to hand your notice in. You can just leave. So try things on. And I think at the moment it can feel like volunteering opportunities are a bit thin on the ground, jobs are a bit thin on the ground. I recently recruited a volunteer purely on her Instagram account. She had an Instagram account where she has been cataloging buildings using an Instagram account. So like buildings of historic interest that people don't notice when she's like going around in her life. That's fascinating. That's great. If I was her, I would definitely put that in my real CV. For real jobs. So there are things that you can be doing outside of volunteering, outside of working, that make people pay attention to your CV. And there are events here and there, and I think that something that's really important is to start looking at being the most intersectional practitioner you can be, being the most inclusive and able to work with as many different people as possible. So if you see an event that is about skilling you up to learn Makaton or sign language or dementia-friendly training, any of these skill sets about working with people who have been underrepresented in heritage and the creative industries, like just grab them.
And one of the things that has been really becoming really important like lately is the term of networking, of maybe as how in Newcastle University, in the career service, we call it as making career contacts to like make it less daunting for students. How do you think that kind of like fits back into if you want to get into like this sector?
Okay, there are 3 skills. There are 3 skills. You can be good, so you can be good at what you do. You can be fast, deliver it on time, respond to emails quickly, and you can be nice. You have to be at least 2. If you are at least 2 of those things, you will be able to network really easily. If your reputation is someone who's good and fast, it doesn't matter if you're not very nice. If your reputation is someone who delivers things on time and they're really lovely, but they're maybe not the best quality, you will also get on fine, but you need at least 2 of the 3. So if you're worried about interpersonal skills and feel like you don't have them, just work on being good and fast. Just work on being someone who has a reputation as delivering things on time that are of really good quality. And I think in terms of networking, especially within the Northeast, it's not very corporate. It's not sort of I guess networking does have a bad rep. It's about getting your face known, getting your name known. Like there are famous volunteers in the Northeast, people who everyone knows because they're a really good volunteer and have volunteered with lots of different people. One of whom just published her first novel. So like that level of reputation is important sometimes. She's lovely and we all know she's lovely. So I'm pretty sure that everyone in like a venue in the Northeast is going to buy her book. That's what I'm talking about. Like being personable, and I guess the Northeast we say canny, be canny. So know what you're talking about and be friendly as possible. I guess with COVID, networking is a little bit harder, but at the same time, it's absolutely not. So, for example, if you were at an art opening, if you were at an exhibition opening or a museum opening, drinking wine and eating cheese and talking to your friends and trying to get the nerve up to talk to someone who's important, you don't have your name like right there.
Yeah.
Like in real life, no one knows your name. I mean, I should have changed this to say Lily, but I now know some people's names because I've been able to go, oh, that was a really good point, and then write their name down. And now I know who they are. Likewise, I've never been to so many conferences as I have this year. Conferences have become so much easier to attend because of Zoom. So I've been in breakout rooms with directors of venues who again, if I was at a regular conference, potentially I wouldn't have a conversation with because there is always going to be a hierarchy. But if you're put in a breakout room with a CEO,
you've got to. You've got to talk with them. Doing anything.
So I think in some ways networking because it's like this, it's but not analog anymore because it's step by step. It's a little tiny bit easier, and everyone has their email like on their website. I don't know anyone who isn't a bit hungry for company at the moment. So I have a number of coffee mornings with colleagues that are just about having a conversation about the sector, about what's happening, about good practice, what's on our to-do lists. I wouldn't mind someone cold calling me and saying, I want to get involved, can I have a conversation? We're all a bit hungry for human contact right now, so it's in a way, the ball kind of is in your court.
And with that as well, there has been kind of like a more shift in networking digitally. There's like a bigger emphasis of, as I have already mentioned in the call, for example, LinkedIn is how I got to know stuff about, for example, what you were doing. And it's how different people will either find like more opportunities, more different people, and even trying to like connect with them without using those interpersonal skills that maybe some people are not really comfortable in using. So that is giving us like students, graduates, full-time workers, volunteers, the opportunity to like expand your network without I mean, I guess that you still need to go a little bit out of your comfort zone because you need to be proactive enough to like kind of reach out to someone in there. But it has built like additional opportunities to people to do it. So yeah, with that, to everyone that is watching, please make sure that you have a LinkedIn because it's gonna be an eye-opening experience.
I graduated in 2012 and my lecturers forced us to set up LinkedIn accounts. We all hated it. It was tiny back then. It had no purpose. No one was on it. But it means that I have a almost 10-year-old LinkedIn account that has a bunch of stuff on it and has been useful. Like, also, I know that younger people are more hesitant around Twitter. I know that it's seen as like a slightly older platform, maybe a slightly more professional platform. There are so many opportunities that just flash by on Twitter with organizations that you will want to work with. And if you're not following them, if you're not engaging with them, then you're going to miss them.
Exactly. It's about building your commercial awareness in that sense, which is kind of like one of the top like skills that graduate employees were actually seeking of like people that are applying for the jobs. That it's really important to kind of like follow what everyone is doing in order to find out how that reciprocity in like communication, that how you could help them, but also how they can help you develop yourself, which is, I believe that is really important.
And I think someone's social media presence to show you how they speak to different people in a way that is really hard to gauge. But so, for example, I don't really have a Facebook presence, but my Twitter presence is really chatty and very, very me. Your brand is important. Who you are needs to be authentic. With participation or engagement, you're not always going to win. You're not always going to have an event where 1,000 people come and all of them are equally happy. You are going to have some events where it turns out that the listing wasn't published in time and only 3 people show up and they thought they were coming to something different. And then the next event you do will be different and will be much better. And being able to, I think one of the reasons that this really appealed to me as a career is when you're an artist, that is what you are. It's not just a job, it's an identity. When you work in museums and galleries, you just work in a museum or gallery. It doesn't determine your worth, it doesn't determine your value. It's something that you can leave at the end of the day, unless there's literally nothing else to do. But so that sense of whether you win or fail on an event by event basis or a project by project basis is less integral to who you are. So I think in a way it has resilience built in. You have that sort of level of self-care of not basing your worth on that. In terms of, I think something that's really cool as well is that much more reflective practice is coming in. When I first started working in galleries and museums, you would evaluate things. That's a big part of the job, being able to evaluate and say who came, what did they think. But you wouldn't be able to absorb that information. That would be for your funder, for your boss, so you could report back and say this is how well I've done, but you wouldn't be able to reflect on it. And I think that there's been a real change into much more reflective practice, figuring out what you did in that session that made it go well, made it go badly, what about it excited you, what responses were interesting, and turning you into a much more reflective partner and practitioner. I think that helps with resilience a lot, giving that time to not just always be in like an active mode, but in a reflective, responsive mode. I think that really helps to sort of build you into a better practitioner. Yeah.
Obviously, we know that there is a lot of uncertainty in the job market right now, with both volunteer and also paid work. What tips would you give Newcastle students that are watching this right now in order to like kind of like still put themselves out there and still trying to like seek jobs, still trying to like seek self-growth in that way?
I guess, honestly, I keep going back to the fact that the landscape's blank for you to draw on right now. So the biggest obstacle for you as an emerging professional is that you don't have a venue, you don't have an organization behind you. But organizations don't have venues right now. They also don't have you and your and your knowledge of what the youngsters are doing. You can do things. You can do just as much as the big organizations, because the big organizations are using Zoom and using social media. I would say that if you can't find an internship, volunteering opportunity, entrance level job, go make your own museum, go make your own exhibition, go take photos of buildings and curate your own Instagram. Like, you have the same tools as me. I can't do what you do, but when this is a bit more neutral, when we have those jobs returning, funding is coming back already, especially within the arts in the Northeast. There's been a bunch of grants that have just came back to national portfolio organizations, so jobs will be forthcoming. But yeah, you've got, I mean, it's not like no one has any time right now, right? You've got the time, you've got the skills and the tools to do something incredible. I don't know the answer because I'm not you. I don't know what the thing is that you could do, but that's why I'm not doing it. So if you do it and then show me, then I'm going to be impressed.
Mm-hmm. So it's that way of like putting yourself out there that will basically help you in a way or another in the end. Because even if you don't get a job on that, you still have the experience that you have gained, you still have the knowledge, and you have the developmental skills that will help you for the next one.
And I mean, like, this opportunity that you've taken, Lander, to be involved in this project and interview someone, was that something that you'd done before?
Not necessarily. I have done similar things. I have been part of like heritage and culture programs back home in Spain. I have been interviewing people for my dissertation, for example, but I haven't never actually done like an interview like this, for example. And
now you have.
Yeah, and now I have. So it's something else that, for example, I have learned myself on. I have built my confidence in order to do this. And yeah, done some research and that is also kind of like helping with my self-growth in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we changed the lunchtime events to be Facebook Lives, I had to figure out how to do that, like how. And I think something that is worth mentioning is that when I was a graduate, Google was around, but it wasn't as instinctual as it is now. Like, I don't know how to do that, I'll Google it. There weren't 1,000 tutorials. There wasn't this wealth of information to help you figure out who you're interviewing and how do you do that? How do you structure it? You've done a great job, by the way.
Thank you so much. I was a little bit like, oh God, have I done it well?
No, especially if this is the first time you've done it. Really, really well done. I had a really nice chat.
Thank you. With that, finishing on that as well, would you be able to like give us some, if you have any vacancies right now, could you explain them a little bit more for like the people that are watching, if this is something that is of interest for any of them?
Yeah, fantastic. So we have our team of curious curators who are developing an exhibition of our collection, which will be installed in our vestry safe around March time. So I suppose you could get involved and give feedback, be involved in making the resource that we're going to make for people to engage with. And we are going to do that again next year. We also have a vacancy for a placemaker volunteer. So something that we've identified is that we have a lot of incoming people who need to know like a potted history of the church quite quickly. So we need a volunteer who can research the church, research the East End, and create like a resource that will introduce people to the history of it quite quickly. We're going to have some vacancies in learning and engagement as soon as we're able to do it physically. But if you are passionate enough about this, send me an email. Convince me that you should be able to volunteer now. My email address is ldaniels@thecct.org.uk. And if you wanted to check out our social media platforms, it's 17Ninteen, the number 17 and the word 19 on all platforms. Do give us a follow or a stalk.
You never know how a little bit of research can help you. So you will find better opportunities, you will find more people, and you will help yourself in a way as well.
Mm-hmm. And like I say, that it's a bit scary right now. That a blank page is one of the scariest things, right? The potential is terrifying. It could be brilliant, it could be dreadful. But I mean, I have some volunteers from Newcastle Uni, and I know you're incredible. I see the output of young people at the moment, and it is astonishing in the face of like trauma. I don't think, like I say, I don't think you can mess up with this. We need more diverse voices involved in arts and heritage, and we need them to be saying things that we don't know how to say them yet. So we need you.
That's a really good way of ending this on. Do you have any final comments that you would like to share with our audience?
Just to check out we put this digital picnic on our Facebook on Thursday. I think it's the 4th of March, Thursday the 4th, in response to this conversation that we're having today. So if you do check that out, and do get in touch if you have any need of a chat.
Great, that's amazing. We'll be sure to put the links into that on the description of the video below. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Lily, for taking the time to speaking with me today and for being part of Newcastle University Creative Careers for 2021. And for you guys that are watching this video, please be sure to subscribe, like, and share this video with other peers or students. And also leave a comment if you would like to ask anything. And also please be sure to check the Instagram page of NCL Careers in order to find out what more things are happening throughout this week. Right. Thank you so much, then.
Thank you, Lander.
Okay.